Most architecture students do not fail because their work is bad. They fail because their layout is messy. Hi guys, welcome back to Archipath, and today I'm going to be talking about how to easily and clearly lay out your design project or portfolio so you can get the best grade possible. It isn't just a collection of drawings that you've done, it's how you tell your story and how you communicate. Your layout is how you can tell that story in a form of controlling the narrative. Through is a grid. A grid helps you to keep everything consistent. So depending on your software, you can set grids up. So if you're using PowerPoint, you can set it in the form of a margin. And so what that does, it applies it to each page and keeps it consistent so that if you're laying out an image, you can keep it central to a border. And then you can do the same thing in InDesign. You can set your margins in the form of a grid, and then that also keeps it easy to read and for the person to just focus on the information rather than get thrown off if they like flick next to the next page and wonder why your image is closer. Normally, I like to stick either to a 2 or 3 column grid, so either dividing it by a 2 column grid or a 3 column grid like that. Obviously you can space that more centrally or equally as you like, but this is generally how I like to do it. And then the second important point to consider is that not everything on your page is equal. So you wouldn't place a floor plan the same size as like a section drawing. You need to figure out which drawing you think on that particular page is the most important or communicates your idea more. So normally how I like to lay out a page is on one side I like to have my title or description of a project. So I like to think of that as like a subheading. So I'll have a subheading towards maybe the left or right depending on your preference, and then a short description of your project. And then I would have a slightly larger image, so your floor plan, and then a couple of diagrams. So this is just an example of how I would lay out my drawing. So as you can see, you have the title here, and then you'd have a more like description, and then your big image, whatever it is, floor plan, section, elevation, and then 2 smaller images. That can vary depending on your project. You can make it slightly more like detailed, depending on how much you want to cram in, or if you have like a space limit or things like that. But generally I like to keep it more simple, so it's easier to understand. So this is another like way that you can lay out your page, slightly more dense, but it really depends on what you want to showcase. And then the third point is white space is not a bad thing. It helps to keep your like images flowing and for your space to breathe. And then it gives people time to just fully concentrate on your drawings without having to feel too overwhelmed or not knowing where their eyes should settle on a drawing. It also helps you to make your page feel more professional, as it looks more clean and less cluttered. The way that you could also lay out your drawings is to group stuff. So you could either start off with a few pages, say ground floor plan, and then pair that with a first floor plan so that you're looking at your project in some sort of order. And then after that, maybe you could start with an elevation of your drawing, and then maybe like a rough diagram showing your space. And then you can move on to like elevation or more perspective type drawing. So really think about your narrative and how you want to show your project so that when people flick through the pages, they can tell your process and how your design has emerged. Another point is think about your pages as like a development. So what people often don't really tell you, but is really important, and loads of employees particularly and tutors like to see, is if you've done a development sketch. So this can be messy, it doesn't have to be perfect, but normally I like to pair it with a like more sophisticated image. So I'd have my big render towards the top, and then maybe like 1 or 2 little development images. And then that really helps to show that you've thought about your design and also your process of thinking, how it's not perfect, but it's helped you reach your conclusion. Another key aspect is keeping a consistent font style. This is really important as it helps your project seem like cohesive throughout the whole pages and also ties different projects together. Particularly for fonts, I personally like to use on the Adobe website, you can type in Adobe fonts and then there's such a wide range of fonts for you to choose from, and you can press download or import, and that depending on what software, if it's Photoshop or InDesign or even Illustrator, you can just import the fonts directly and then they'll like show up in a little tab. You can also get like other alternative fonts, just typing in free fonts online, and then that can like generate a range of different websites. But for me, I just found Adobe fonts the most reliable option. Layout, if your project is messy and too cluttered with way too many images, people can often get overwhelmed, and even if some of your drawings are really, really good, they can often get lost in the process of the messiness. So remember margins, white space is good, keep your fonts consistent, and try to lay out your images in a consistent format following some sort of logic. Guys, thank you for watching, and hopefully some of this information has been useful to you, and if you're looking to do your next design project, hopefully it will improve your design, and also in terms of process, your tutor will be able to see your project more clearly and you'll be able to get a higher grade. And if you have any other comments that you'd like me to respond to or any videos you'd like me to make, please put it in the comments below. It will really mean a lot to me. Thank you.